Welcome to the Philippines. Here with you today, we are going to share with you in class everything you need to know about the Philippines. First, let us begin with a brief knowing about the history of Philippines. The inhabitants of Philippines were from different sections of the world. People who migrated from the mainland, mainly from Asia such as China. Did you know that the Philippines had rich history combining Asian, European, and American influences? Prior to the Spanish colonization in 1521, the Filipinos had a rich culture and were trading with the Chinese and the Japanese.
Philippines, an island country of Southeast Asia in the western Pacific Ocean. In 1898, after 350 years and 300 rebellions, the Filipinos, with leaders like Jose Rizal and Emilio Aguinaldo, succeeded in winning their independence. In the 1898, the Philippines became the first and only colony of the United States. Following Philippine-American War, the United States brought widespread education to the island.
Now, we are going to get into the Philippines before the Spanish came. Long before the colonization of the Spanish, people living in the Philippines maintained their lifestyle by fishing, cultivating foods from nature, and relying most of their proteins from hunting. Around 2,000 years ago, people living in the mountains in the northern part of Luzon were able to cultivate rice as their source of energy because they had a rice terrace to grow rice. And this is what their rice terrace would look like. On the other side of the land, people who live down the mountain mainly live in big families. These were known as the barangays, pronounced as barangay. Interestingly, the barangays were living under the chief or datu, chieftain who looked out for everybody else like the chief of the village. Every tribe would have their own datu or chief. The barangays only populated around 100 of members altogether. However, they were the most stable groups in the past. Here's a picture of the datu for you to comprehend fully what they looked like. Although the barangays lived in small groups, they maintained a social system. Firstly, the highest were the datu and his family members, followed by the freeholders, and lastly, the dependents. Family members of the datu were considered as royalty and/or nobility. The dependents were also divided into 3 types, altogether including sharecroppers, debt peonage, and war captives. Debt peonage and war captives were considered as slaves afterward by the Spanish because back then there were no slavery in the land, so people don't really know the term slave or slavery. Continuing, the marriage life before the Spanish colonial was mainly through bilateral kinship to maintain the class system. Divorce was barely a problem back then because it was acceptable and marriages were stable. Moreover, religious faith was diverse for the Filipinos. Some were monotheism, while others maintained a polytheistic faith. None of them were to be the main religious beliefs for the people. Nevertheless, things changed in around 15th century when the Islam was brought into the islands of Borneo, like the Mindanao and Sulu archipelago. As you can predict, the Islamic views passed through Brunei to Borneo, which slowly influenced the people in nearby islands. This map here is to show how close the islands are. Even so, the Philippines weren't based on Islamic faith after the Spanish colonized because the new religion was brought in instead. Let us move forward to the period when the Spanish colonized Philippines.
The history of Philippines from 1565 to 1898, also known as Spanish Philippines or Spanish colonial period, was the period during which the Philippines were ruled as the Captaincy General of Philippines within the Spanish East Indies, under New Spain until Mexican independence in 1821, resulting in directly Spanish control during a period of governmental instability there.
One important thing to realize is the term Hispanization is a key word to describe what was going on back in the 16th century Philippines. The word itself refers to any place or anyone exposed to Hispanic culture or language that influences their life, in this case, the Philippines. Another thing to remember is that the Philippines was colonized by two big nations at that time, Spain and America. Back in the 16th century, Spain decided to colonize the Philippines with one motive, which was to create wealth for their nation by finding spices in the Philippines. The first Spanish man to set sail for the Philippines was Ferdinand Magellan, on which he reached in March 1521 in Cebu. Today, Cebu is a city located in the Central Visayas region. It was the first capital of the Philippines as well as the first place that the Spanish settled. The second Spanish sailor that was sent by King Philip II as a quest for permanent settlement in the Philippines was Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, who also landed in Cebu in 1565. The Spanish were able to take control of most parts of the north down to other areas by the end of the 16th century. Consequently, the Spanish collect taxes from the people on farming products that were imported from America. In the beginning, this went on without any conflict, but the locals started to go against this idea by not paying. The tax systems was then abandoned by the time of the 17th century. Also, the datu that were once the highest standing in the class structure fell under the Spanish rule. Not only that, but the Spanish also rule over the economic situations and the political institution as well. And that is about the Spanish in Philippines. Let's move on to the next part, which is the society in the country. In this part, you are expected to know more about society in the Philippines. The Philippines is considered a collectivistic society, meaning that people are looking after one another like family members in the long run. Plus, relationships among family are committed long-term. Adding to that, it is also a country with mixture of uniformity among its people. A research result from NCCA, or the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, shows that most Filipinos value family, education, religious faith, and many more. These values are taught in school for Filipinos in each generation to pass down the strong relationship among their communities. By putting the family as their first priority and value in life, Filipinos are able to meet inspiration in life, love, as well as their faith in God. You see, in the Philippines, there is a saying that pamilya among daganan, or family comes first. No matter what gender or sexuality you are, family is the most important thing in life. Back during the Spanish colonization, education started to spread to people. Many were able to acquire academic knowledge. This resulted in rich, elite Filipinos wanting to gain more notice socially. They would start obtaining the taste of Europe, build big houses to show off wealth, engage in big church activities as well as funding the church. Rise of elites then came along with discriminations among people. People of Spanish ethnicity and Chinese were the most common one to be distinct. And that's a wrap on the society of the Philippines. We are now in the part where you are going to absorb more information on the islands of Philippines. Firstly, according to the National Geographic, the Philippines held over 7,640 islands altogether, and around 2,000 of them were inhabited. So out of the 7,000 islands, only 100 have names. Altogether, it was divided into three big areas. The first area is Luzon, which is located in the northern part of the country. This is also where Manila is located. Second is the island region called the Visayas. Well-known islands in this area consist of islands like Cebu, Panay, Negros, and more. Finally, the last area or the biggest island is the Mindanao. Not only is Mindanao located in the southern part, but it is also the second largest island in the Philippines. Moving forward, Although English and Filipino are the main communicating languages, there is also diversity among islanders because the country itself is consists of numbers of ethnicity. Adding to that, it was also colonized by the Spanish for over 300 years, influencing most citizens in the country with Spanish. Commonly, the climate in the islands is tropical and leaning towards monsoonal weather. Most of the regions are all covered by trees and forests, including lowland regions. However, in the past years, these trees and green ecosystem is slowly falling, resulting from mining, developments of human beings, logging, and farming. Notably, the island is a home to many species of wildflowers and indigenous plantations. For example, the orchids and the ferns. Trees that mainly grow in the area are pine trees. Not only do they shelter a green ecosystem, the islands in the Philippines also have over 200 species of mammals. For example, 50 bat species, different types of birds, and of course, a variety of sea life. Ultimately, that is the amazing ecosystem of the Philippines.
Next, let's talk about the event of the Philippine-American Wars. The Philippine-American Wars was an armed conflict fought from February 4 of 1899 to July 2, 1902, between forces of the United States and Filipinos revolutionaries led by President Emilio Aguinaldo. While the United States viewed the conflict as an insurrection standing in the way of extending its manifest destiny influence across the Pacific Ocean. By the way, Filipinos saw it as a continuation of their decading-long fight for independence from foreign rule. The cause of war. Since 1896, the Philippines had been struggling to gain its independence from Spain in the Philippine Revolution. In 1898, the United States intervened by defeating Spain in the Philippines and Cuba in the Spanish-American War. However, the Treaty of Paris, signed on December 10, 1898, to end the Spanish-American War, and allowed the United States to purchase the Philippines from Spain for $20 million. At that time, U.S. President William McKinley had planned to seize most, if not all, of the Philippines during the fighting, then keep what we want in the peace settlement. Like many others in his administration, McKinley believed the Filipino people would be unable to govern themselves and would be better off as an American-controlled protectorate or colony. By the way, on May 19, 1898, Filipino revolutionary Emilio Fami Aguinaldo returned to the Philippines from self-exile in Hong Kong. He declared independence from Spain and later established the First Philippine Republic. The Americans entered into a pact with the Spanish Governor-General to surrender Manila to them. Next is the battle in this war known as the first and largest battle of the Philippine-American Wars, the Battle of Manila Bay. The decision by U.S. policymakers to annex the Philippines was not without domestic controversy. Americans who advocate annexation event a variety of motivations like desire for commercial opportunities in Asia and concern that the Filipinos were incapable of self-rule and fear that if the United States did not take control of the island, another power such as Germany or Japan might do so. Later on, in 1899, fighting broke out between American forces and Filipino nationalists led by Emilio Aguinaldo. The ensuing Philippines-American War lasted 3 years and resulted in the death of over 4,200 Americans and over 20,000 Filipinos. As many as 200,000 Filipino civilians died from violence, famine, and disease. As a result, Filipinos first declared their independence on June 12, 1898. In that day, Leaders of the Philippine Revolution gathered in the city of Cavite, where Emilio Alconado proclaimed the country's freedom from Spain. At the time when the United States and Spain were at war, and when empires such as Germany and Britain had an eye on the vulnerable territory, Alconado demanded for the Philippine Republic a dignified place in the concert of free nations.
Time's moving by really fast as we are now in the next section, Philippines' role during the Great War. As you might expect, the Philippines did not have any major role in the participation of World War I compared to other Asian countries. However, most of the Filipinos wanted to join the war. They were involved in the war in the role of the Philippines National Guard, or PNG. During World War I, the Philippines was under the colonial power of the US. Further, they were fighting the war against the American forces in order to gain their freedom from the colonizer between the year 1899 up to 1901 and even up to 1903 in some parts of the country. While the war broke out in the European land, America decided to stay neutral to the war. This meant that the Philippines would also remain neutral because they were part of the American Commonwealth. Moreover, Francis B. Harrison ensured that the nations fighting in the wars would not cause any effect on the Philippines' shore. Not only that, but there were also prevention of propaganda and espionage, or acts of spying, as well in the Philippines region. During the war, import and export goods from the Philippines were banned. Both the Americans and the Filipinos tried really hard to stay out of the war, but due to the lack of income from the imports and exports of goods that must be traded with Germany regularly, the Philippines' economy hit a drop. Because the US had promised the Filipinos their independence if they successfully self-governed themselves, they were ready to join the war and fight alongside American troops. When the US decided to join the war, most American troops in the Philippines had to step out and join the war in Europe, leaving the Philippines under the guard of all Filipino troops. However, these Filipinos were still under the US military. The only all-American soldiers were the 31st Infantry Regiment, but they were dispatched. Interesting fact to know. During the war, the Philippines funded the US and also built a destroyer warship called the USS Rizal for the Americans as well. It was the first and only American warship that was named after a Filipino, Jose Rizal. The Philippines provided over 25,000 men for the American troops to fight in the war, although the Americans only asked for 15,000 men. These men were the Philippine National Guard, known as PNG. Sadly, these men never really get to act in the war. The Filipinos were pretty loyal and supportive to the Americans. The most famous Filipino soldier was Private Thomas Mateo Claudio. He died in June of 1918 in the Battle of Chateau Thierry. Here is his picture. He was the first Filipino soldier to die in World War I in France. Filipino participated in the war better as a resources market where they provide this and that for the US, but they barely did participate in the battlefield. As can be seen, these are the roles of the Philippines during this Great War. As we have talked about Philippines' role during World War I, it would be a waste if we don't talk about their part in World War II, which is what this section is about. One might be wondering, was the Philippines part of World War II? The answer is yes, they were fighting during the war. Dated back to the time when Japan was bombing the Pearl Harbor on December of 1941, its target wasn't just the famous harbor in Hawaii, but the Philippines was also targeted by the Japanese as well. Japan was also able to take over Manila for a while during the war. Because the Philippines was under the US, they were part of the American Commonwealth. Therefore, President Roosevelt pledged to keep the Philippines protected as part of America. Not only that, but the Filipinos were under the rule of the American Army while fighting the war against the Japanese. They were also considered American soldiers nationally, Moreover, President Roosevelt also promised them the same care and benefits as the other American army. As stated by history, Filipinos fought alongside the American soldiers under the command of General Douglas MacArthur in one of the battles called the Battle of Bataan. Let's get to know what the Battle of Bataan is. One significance of this battle is the Bataan Death March, where surrendered Americans and Filipinos had to march to the prison camp that the Japanese held. The soldiers had to march in harsh conditions, specifically in heat for 65 miles to the prison campsite. This caused a huge number of deaths among the surrendered soldiers. They marched all the way from the Mariveles to the Bataan Peninsula for the exact 65 miles. This was known as the Bataan Death March. Not only the weather was not suitable for the march, but also the terrible treatment by the Japanese soldiers that caused many of the surrenders to feel weak and died. In the end, America was able to defeat their enemies and take Manila back. The Americans also took control of Bataan Peninsula, where the captives were held. The Japanese general who was in charge of the death march was later executed for the brutal actions and deaths of many. Lieutenant General Homa Masaharu was executed on April 3, 1946 by firing squad. And that is the end of the roles of the Philippines and their war role.
By the time you get to 1946, the Filipinos were finally free from the Spanish. The Filipino movement against Spanish authorities had both violent and non-violent proponents. Wholesale Rizal was the most prominent face of the moderate opposition to the Spanish rule. He wrote his first novel, No Limitan Querer, which means Touch Me Not or The Social Cancer, and his public execution was carried out in Manila on December 30 in 1896. The Philippines take its name from Philip II, who was king of Spain during the Spanish colonization of Iceland in the 16th century, because it was under Spanish rule for 333 years and under U.S. tutelage for a further 48 years. The Philippines has many cultural affinity with the West.
Since we have talked about a few things that you needed to know about the Philippines, we should also get to know their current politics as well. In this section, we're going to talk about the current election in the Philippines. On 8th of February this year, song and dance performances were a campaign signal that the Philippines had launched their elections. The main people running for the presidential election is none other than the notorious son of a dictator, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., and the current Vice President Leni Robredo. The popularity of Mr. Marcos, the son of the late president of the same name, is a return to form. He is particularly attractive to young voters who seem either unconcerned about or unaware of the record of the older Marcos, a dictator who ruled for over 2 decades and was deposed only after a popular uprising in 1986. The younger Marcos tries to maintain his appeal by avoiding the subject of his father's regime. The son and namesake of the late Philippines dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, lead in the race to become the next president. His popularity comes from 3 decades after his family returned from exile in Hawaii. As NPR's Julie McCarthy reports, a victory in the May election would mark a stunning restoration of power. On February 8, tens of thousands of people left their homes to support their preferred presidential and vice presidential candidates, as the Philippines marked the start of the 90-day campaign period leading to national elections in May. However, due to the pandemic situation, Philippines' coming election and the election campaign are putting its people under the risk of the spread of COVID-19 virus, since there were no distancing measures among the crowds. Not only that, but many citizens are going to be out of home to the voting centers. It is more likely to create another outbreak in the Philippines if they do not have strict measures to prevent the virus. Issues involving religious matter and the current elections. According to Reuters, Philippines Catholic priest Father Nap Baltazar came out to express his support for the presidential election candidate, Leni Robredo, by wearing a pink bracelet inscribed with the text, "Let Leni lead," which obviously is a symbol for Robredo's supporters. Father Baltazar is a priest that belongs to Asia's biggest Catholic nation. Most members of this church have abandoned neutrality for the support of Marcos Jr. due to what his father has done to the people in the past. In action, they openly supported Leni Robredo by wearing pink as it is Robredo's team color. Although it isn't quite right for the church to express personal opinion on politics, the priests have shown numbers of strong support toward this election for the better of their nation. Furthermore, as the election date is set at 9th of May, the latest polls show that Marcos is holding the lead over his rival, Robredo, and this will be up for the Filipinos to witness in the upcoming month. Interestingly, most of the people supporting Marcos are young adults in their 20s. They are citizens that have access to social media platforms. However, these news on social media are flooded with dishonesty and false information as the propaganda created by Marcos supporters hoping to wash away what the late Marcos had done in the 20 years ago. Next are the things you need to know about the election according to Reuters. What's being decided? Out of the 110 million population, 67.5 million of them are eligible to vote. Adding to that, the majority of ballots will be cast around different cities on the election day. There will be many positions that needed to be filled, including president seat, vice president seat, 12 senate seats, 300 lower houses seats, and roughly local positions that contain 1,800 members from city mayors and provincial governors across the islands. A single voter must only select one preferred candidate for each of the national positions on a single ballot. Unlike the US, the winners serve 3-year terms except for the vice president and the president, as well as other senators who have to serve for 6 years. Who are the presidential contenders? Ferdinand Marcos Jr., 64, the son and namesake of the dictator overthrown in a 1986 People Power Uprising, is the clear leader in opinion polls and is promising for unity for his country. Marcos is a political heavyweight from a family with wealth and powerful connections. His critics say him winning the presidency is the Marcos family's endgame in clearing his family's name in a controversial past. What about political parties? In the Philippines, political parties have tended to be secondary to personalities, with loyalties shifting very easily among people. Widespread defections are anticipated, and elected lawmakers will often ally themselves with whoever becomes the president. Although rivalries and ideological differences will ensure a political opposition exists. Endorsements of celebrities, influencers, and political incumbents carry enormous weight, far more than party affiliation, and many voters make choices based on how famous candidates are. Dynasties are also powerful, like that of Marcos, with families holding elected posts for decades. All these are the important things you need to know about the current situation of Philippines politics.
Historically speaking, Filipino Catholicism is shaped by local indigenous practice and by the Spanish, who conquered it in the 16th century and ruled it until the early 20th century. The Philippines proudly boasts to be the only Christian nation in Asia, and it is the third largest Catholic population in the world. More than 86% of population is Roman Catholic, 6% belong to various nationalized Christian cults, and another percent belong to well over 100 Protestant denominations. In addition to the Christian majority, there is a vigorous 4% Muslim minority, concentrated on the southern island of Mindanao, Zulu, and Palawan. There are at least 175 languages spoken in the Philippines, and at least 171 of them are considered living languages. You will have no trouble being understood through since more than 52 million people speak English, making it fifth largest English-speaking nation in the world. It's the home of Asia's first basketball league. Basketball is a national obsession in the Philippines. It started the love affair began under American colonial rule during the early 20th century, when it was first introduced into the public school system as a women's game. Today, it's everywhere, from makeshift hoops on street corners to dedicated sports centers. The Philippines is one of the world's largest producers of coconuts, mangosteens, papaya, and bananas can also be found there.
Another interesting thing to know about the Philippines is the Manila City Jail, one of the world's most overcrowded prisons. 5,000 men were put into this jail, while it's only built for 1,200 people. Originally, it was built 6 decades ago to house only 800. Almost 60% of men are in for drug offenses, and there are only 20 guards assigned. Every single step is a place for them to sleep, including on the ground of an outdoor basketball court and on the steps of a staircase. Even though it is clear that life is hard in this place, some inmates say that it is safer to be in here than out on the street where the police could kill you.
Life in the Philippines generally revolves around the extended family, including parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, up to several times removed, and other relatives. Members of extended families gather for major life events such as baptisms and confirmation for Catholic Filipinos, circumcision for Muslim Filipinos, and marriages. Early Spanish chroniclers testify that Filipinos carved images of their gods and goddesses in wood. They also played a variety of music instruments, including inborn flutes and jiltaps. Various seasonal celebrations called for certain instrument, music, songs, and dance. Major meals in most Filipino society are built around boiled or steamed rice. Small amount of meat, including chicken, pork, in non-Muslim communities, goat or fish complement the rice or noodle core. Assorted alcoholic drinks are made from coconut sap, sugarcane, and rice. The malong is a colorful woven tube of cloth that both men and women can wear in a variety of ways. For informal and formal gatherings, many men in urban areas wear the balong, an artistically embroidered shirt. So, the Tonhom, a long garment with large butterfly sleeve, is popular among urban ladies.
Next, let's talk about the education system. The education system of the Philippines has been highly influenced by the country's colonial history, including periods of Spanish, American, and Japanese rules. The most important and lasting contributions came during America's occupation of the country.
It was during this period that English was introduced as the primary language of instruction and the system of public education was first established. A system modeled after the United States school system and administered by the newly established Department of Instruction. In 1908, The University of the Philippines was chartered representing the first comprehensive public university in the nation's history. Many of country teachers and professors have earned advanced degrees from the United States University. The Philippine system of education has long served as a model for other Southeast Asian countries.
Next, we're gonna look how other countries influence the culture of the Philippines. Let's start with India. According to the National Geographic DNA study, 3% of the average Filipino genes are of the South Asian origin. In 2016, there are over 5,000 Punjabi Indians alone in the Philippines, not including illegal Indian Punjabi immigrants and other Indian ethnic groups in the Philippines. There are also certain industries which are of Indian origin, especially the largest workforce like Indophils Textile, Global Steel, Hinduja Global, and Aegis People Support. Moreover, traces of Hindu in the Philippines are found in religion, jobs, writing, language, and customs. To describe, there was Hindu element in the religious beliefs of the ancient Filipinos, and the name of their gods came from India. For example, Bathala, supreme god of the pre-Spanish Tagalogs, is identified with Indra, the chief of the Vedic gods, resembles the Hindu trinity of gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. In terms of textiles, the sarong and the putong of ancient Filipinos are from India. About literature, popular Filipino epics like Dalagan, Indrapata, and Suleiman, Lamang, Ibalon, and Hathat, and Alim was inspired by Mahabharata and other Hindu epics. For language, the most common language spoken in the Philippines today are English and Filipino, which is based on Tagalog. Spanish was an official language of the country until the change of government in 1987, which led to Spanish being dropped as an official language for political reasons. The Spanish spoken in the Philippines today has a great affinity with Mexican Spanish. Filipino Spanish contains many Mexican Spanish loanwords of Tonhom origin, which were first incorporated into Mexican Spanish, and which do not exist in European Spanish. Filipino language have significantly assimilated aspects of the Spanish language and contain thousands of loanwords, and some grammatical concepts are used in Chavacano, Cebuano, Tagalog, Ilocano, and Ilocano. The two official languages of the Philippines are Filipino and English. Filipino is the national language, and the official status of English is a holdover from its time as a U.S. territory between the years of 1898 and 1946. Filipino is the primary language used in school and media, and is also the lingua franca that unites the nation's disparate linguistic communities. Are Filipino and Tagalog more or less the same language? Almost, but not quite. Filipino is an updated version of Tagalog that includes elements of alternative Philippine language, as well as English, Spanish, Malay, and Chinese. At the time as the main language spoken in Manila, Tagalog became the national language of the Philippines in 1937 when Congress voted to include a native language among the officially recognized language. Eventually, Tagalog was renamed Filipino, and when the constitution was amended in 1973 under dictator President Ferdinand Marcos,
Congress took steps to create a new iteration of the language, which was to be known as Filipino. Filipino then gained official status in 1987. Let's talk about festivities and holidays. The 1st of January is the New Year Day as every country around the world. Every year on the 3rd Sunday of January, the Philippines celebrates the festival of the Santo Niño or Holy Child Jesus, which held in Cebu City. In March and April, people would celebrate Semana Santa or Easter. 31st October to 2nd November is the Day of the Dead, All Souls Day and All Saints Day, where families spend much of the 3 days and 3 evenings visiting their ancestral graves, showing respect and honoring the departed relatives by feasting, decorating, offering prayers. 24th December is the Christmas Eve. 25th December is the Christmas Day. Next, we have to know how British influence on the Philippines. So, British opened the Philippines to the outside world. Moreover, British introduced English language and free local election, and the music and dance of the British also influenced the Philippines, as we can see in this video. Next, some social customs come from the British. The British taught the Filipinos to shake hands in the public. So, we have to learn about American influence on the Philippines. First, English language. The English language that American has influence on the Philippines, that English as the second national language because it influenced Tagalog language. Like Filipino people were speaking Tanglish, which is Tagalog combined with English. It is like mixing English with Tagalog. For example, cake, cookie, ball pen, interview, computer, and X-ray. Second, clothing. So the clothing of the American also influenced the Philippines like American clothing on Filipino culture. For example, as we can see in the picture, polo shirts, tennis shoes, short skirts, dress, high heels, something like this picture. Third, also the food. American restaurants are popular in the Philippines. For example, McDonald's, KFC, Dunkin' Donuts, and Starbucks. In the present relationship, British and the Philippines relation. Important people from the UK has been visiting the Philippines, including 3 members of the royal family: Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, Princess Anne, and Prince Andrew, Duke of York. Moreover, members of British Parliament have visited, including the British Foreign Secretary Sir Geoffrey Howe and Philip Hammond visited in 1986, 1988, and 2016 in order.
Filipino Foreign Secretary Ro Maglapus became the first Philippine minister to visit Britain in 1989. The British helped the Filipinos in many ways. The UK government also spends in a region of £2 million per year of funding to facilitate scientific collaboration with the Philippines. The UK provides more than £77 million of humanitarian aid to Philippines during Typhoon Haiyan. The UK plays an important part in the BILATERAL peace process. The Philippines airport was designed by British company.
During World War II, the Philippines fought on the same side as the United Kingdom since they were under the American Commonwealth. Due to that, the countries developed a diplomatic contact formally in July 4, 1946. The two countries joined in and signed the Philippines-United Kingdom Joint Plan of Action (JPA) on December 11, 2012 in Manila. The document was to cover the 5 key areas of 1. Politics, 2. Economics, 3. Culture, 4. Consular and law enforcement, and 5. Regional and global issues. Currently, Britain is the largest investor in the Philippines among other European nations. The British pretty much took interest in the Philippines' economic and politics situation. Not only they shared economical relations, but both countries also share educational ties with education partnership between top universities of the Philippines and the UK. There were numbers of agreements signed between the two countries for the best of their bilateral relationships. Example: 1. Air Services Agreement signed on 11 December 2012. 2. Memorandum of Understanding on Defense Cooperation between the Philippines and the UK, signed on 4 December 2017. Overall, that is the relationship between the Philippines and the British, and now let's move on to the next part.
For the United States and the Philippines relation, U.S. assistance to the Philippines in many ways. The U.S. government goals in the Philippines are to strengthen democratic governance and support government efforts to promote inclusive development and contribute to security and development cooperation in Indo-Pacific. The U.S. gives Navy support to the Philippines issue on the West Philippine Sea. To save the Philippines' property claim and international waterway from ownership of China that claimed the whole sea was theirs, the U.S. sent the Navy to the sea in order to threaten the Chinese spreading power throughout the surrounding countries of the sea. About the war on drugs. Drug was referred to the drug policy of Duterte, which aimed at the neutralization of illegal drug personalities nationwide. The people who become the suspects are both the users and the dealers. By the time Trump visited Manila in 2017, about 4,000 people were killed under this policy. By November 2018, about 5,000 suspect drug users and dealers died during the police operations, according to the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. But this does not include the thousands of others killed by unidentified gunmen. How about Joe Biden, the current president of the United States? Also have a great relationship with the President Duterte of the Philippines. The Philippines will maintain close and friendly relations with the United States under President-elect Joe Biden. A top Philippine official said amid a period of strain in their decades-old alliance. We congratulate again the incoming president and we look forward to having close and friendly relations with the Biden administration. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque told CNN Philippines. Ties have been tested since Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016. and embarked on months of expletive laden tirades against the United States and threatened repeatedly to scrap their bilateral military agreements. Duterte has sought warmer ties with China and Russia, and took particular aim at former counterpart Barack Obama. He once said he would not visit the United States, calling it a lousy country. Though Duterte has spoken positively about U.S. President Donald Trump, he has remained critical of American foreign policy. Philippine political analysts expect the Biden administration to be more vocal than its predecessor about human rights issues in the Philippines, including Duterte's signature war on drugs, during which thousands of people have been killed.
So this is the end of our presentation. You have a total of 3 questions. First, you have to explain barangay from your understanding. Second, explain the Battle of Bataan. And the last one is to give some examples of the relationship between the Philippines and the United States.